Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we're looking at a couple of prospects the Wolves could consider drafting at number 27. The first round is 1 week from today. We're going to talk about Baylor Scheierman. We're going to talk about Kyshawn George. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Happy Thursday, everybody. Today, I said it's 1 week ago. The draft is 1 week from today. It's actually not true. The first round is 1 week from yesterday. On Wednesday this year, the second round is another night. It's on Thursday. They've split the draft up this year. So all that to say, we got 5 shows, including this one, between now and next week's first round. Lots to cover. We talked a little bit about the overall setup for the draft, what to expect, what the Wolves might be looking for on yesterday's show, Wednesday's show. But today I want to spend roughly half the show on 2 different prospects. So half the show on each individual prospect. We're going to talk about Baylor Scheierman of Creighton, and we're going to talk about Kyshawn George, the University of Miami. So a couple intriguing prospects that are mocked anywhere from like the late lottery into the early second round. And that's kind of the moral of the story of this year's draft is guys are just being mocked everywhere. So we're going to talk about those 2 guys here today, why they could potentially be fits for Minnesota, pros and cons of each player as a potential selection at number 27. It's all that here in just a moment. A big thank you here off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. And that includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T Wolves and also at B Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. All right, so we established on Wednesday's show that the Timberwolves are like the overarching conversation around what the Wolves are looking for this offseason is they need playmaking, they need shot creation, both shot creation, somebody who can create their own shot, also someone who can play make for others, ideally on the perimeter, and then also just overall shooting. And there's this thought out there that they need a backup point guard, and I kind of pushed back against that on Wednesday's show. The short version is they're far more likely to bring back Monte Morris, maybe even Jordan McLaughlin, and try and approximate the value of a backup point guard with Nickeil Alexander-Walker and either Kyle Anderson or whomever they replace Kyle Anderson's role with, and some combination of, whether it's Morris or McLaughlin. But I don't think they're going to go out and draft a Mike Conley replacement. I'm putting this in air quotes if you're not watching on YouTube. I just don't think that's realistic. I don't think that a conference finals team is going to say, all right, let's go find our backup point guard. They may find someone, like maybe they draft someone at 37 or pick somebody, like maybe they find it in a different way, but I don't think that's necessarily what they're trying to do here. So I pushed back on yesterday's show on some of the point guard prospects, like a Tyler Kolek or a, I think it's KJ Simpson from Colorado. Is it KJ from Colorado? I believe it is. I've got it right here. I'm just going to make sure I got that. Yeah, KJ Simpson from Colorado. I just don't think you're going to take a small point guard just to take a point guard and say that they did. So that's where I'm coming from today. And I want to start with one of my favorite. And I'm going to rank when we get to the draft, time for the draft next week, once I'm done with all these kind of scouting reports that I'm doing on the show. And also not just scouting reports, but also how these players would potentially fit Minnesota and why or why not the Wolves may be interested. I'm going to give my kind of overall, like what I would do if I were the Wolves, like what I'd like to happen, what I think will happen. And we'll go there next week. So let's start with Baylor Scheierman. Baylor Scheierman, we talked a little bit about on Wednesday's show. He went to Creighton the last 2 years, started his college career at SDSU, South Dakota State. He was a jackrabbit, so a 5-year college player, and really came into his own in year 2 with the Creighton Blue Jays. Was really good at SDSU over the course of 3 seasons. Well, I should say really his last 2 years. I mean, the freshman year was the first COVID shortened year and he wasn't a regular starter. But his second 2 years at SDSU, he averaged 16 points, 8 rebounds, shot almost 46% from 3, was over 50% from the field. And then over 2 seasons at Creighton, he was 15.5 points per game, 8.5 rebounds, 37% from three, about 44% from the field, but he was much, much better in his fifth year than he was the year prior. So he is an older prospect, and that's probably the biggest downside is there's limited upside for Baylor Scheierman. He is essentially a 6'6" guard. He's really I think in the NBA, he's probably more of a 3 small ball 4, 6'6", and listed as 6'8" wingspan. The number one thing, so I described him a little bit on Wednesday as a potential Kyle Anderson replacement because I think there's similarities. I probably didn't quite underscore enough that he's a really, really, really good shooter. He may end up being the best shooter in this draft. That's certainly possible. He can shoot off the dribble. He can shoot catch and shoot threes, which is obviously Kyle Anderson. It's what he's worst at. But he does all the other stuff too, and we'll get into that. But shooting-wise, he was, as a college player, was 78th percentile across college, according to Synergy and catch and shoot. He also has great range. There's plenty of clips of him shooting deep threes. A lot of his three-point attempts came above the break. He's obviously good in the corners as well, but he's very comfortable shooting above the break. He's big. The release is good enough. I think it probably could get a little bit quicker, but catch and shoot, like there were coming off ball screens. He had a pretty quick release last year for Creighton. I think that's something he improved over the course of his college career. He can also shoot off the dribble. Like legitimately with the ball in his hands, he could pull up and shoot threes at a good clip. And again, last year it ended up being 38%. The year prior was 36% at Creighton. For his college career, 5 seasons, 39% from three. So he is a really good shooter. And I think he's the type of player that's only going to get better there. He also was 88% from the free throw line last season. He was over 80% every year of his college career, except his freshman year, which was limited opportunities. So I think the shooting is legit for Baylor Scheierman. He's going to shoot at the next level. And that's an element he would bring. And that if the Wolves could kind of fold 2 of these goals into one player, adding shooting and adding playmaking / filling that Kyle Anderson role, that's exactly what they're looking to do. That would be ideal. And he does some of the other slow-mo like stuff well. Off the dribble, I think he's an effective player off the dribble. He certainly has more juice than Kyle Anderson does. He's not overwhelmingly athletic, but he's a good enough athlete. He's got good touch, much better touch than Kyle Anderson. He's got solid feel. I actually think he can score a little bit off the dribble in the NBA. It's not going to be his bread and butter. He's not going to be your primary ball handler, but he strikes me as kind of exactly what I would look for if I were the Wolves, which is somebody who's going to be a secondary playmaker and a secondary scorer that can score at all 3 levels and could be a good passer. He's not going to initiate offense regularly, but he can if he needs to, and he can be that, break glass in case of emergency. Not even that, really, a second or third option at any given point. I just think he's a really, really solid fit. There's nothing about his game that concerns me. He's not a great individual defender, and that, I guess, would be maybe the biggest thing. But at this point, like Kyle Anderson's good. He's not as good of a defender as Kyle Anderson. There's no question about that. But he's a solid team defender. And the steal rate, the block rate, those are low. And that, I don't want to say it concerns me. That's a little bit of a red flag. Normally, I look for steal rates that are much higher from guys who I would claim are good team defenders. But he always seems to be in position. The steal rate actually last year was his lowest since his freshman year, which isn't great. But he's effectively a perimeter player. He's probably the best rebounding perimeter player in this draft class, and certainly one of the best. So you take a guy, that's another area that I've talked about the Wolves need to shore up is the ability to rebound from non-big positions. They were much better last year with Mike Conley instead of D'Lo, and Jalen Noel was allergic to rebounds a couple of years ago, so filling his role with guys who actually rebound a little bit, like Alexander Walker. Again, it's on the margins where that makes up the difference when you've got guys like Gobert who do gobble up rebounds. And Scheierman's going to do that. He's going to rebound immediately. He's got good size, 6'6", 6'8" wingspan, good nose for the ball, good positioning. And that's one of the reasons why I think overall as a team defender, even if the steal and block rate, the stocks are not quite where you normally want them to be, I think all the other stuff is there. I do want to talk a little bit more about him with the ball in his hands offensively, handling and pick and roll. Maybe what I think his ceiling is as well, and what his role could be on the Wolves. We'll get to all that here next, and then we'll close the show by talking about Kyshawn George. So all that is upcoming next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And it's really anything. It's whether you like going to, obviously, sports, could be comedy shows. I'm a big comedy show fan. Concerts, love going to concerts, even theater. Last minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying those last minute deals. They also have zone deals. You can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose your seats. You can also see views from your seat, get a panoramic view in the app before you buy. They also have that lowest price guarantee that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a better price somewhere else. Game Time ticket coverage means that your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets for the MLB or anywhere else with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKDOWNNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Do you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? If so, no doubt you have to turn down the volume because of all the shouting. Instead, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so Baylor Scheierman, 6'6", 6'8" wingspan, 78th percentile catch and shoot, really good range, can shoot off the dribble and catch and shoot. Offensively, I think he plays off the ball, but he's very well-rounded. And that to me means his role can be fill in the blank. He can be that primary scorer or primary playmaker off the bench eventually. I see him as a Kyle Anderson-like role, where some nights, yeah, he's going to have the ball in his hands a little bit more often. Other nights, he's going to play more with Anthony Edwards. He's going to play more with Amante Morris or Jordan McLaughlin or Nickeil Alexander-Walker, someone else that's really, truly initiating the offense. But he has the ability to do more. Coming off a ball screen, catch and shoot. Coming off a ball screen, getting the ball in his hands, and then rolling right into a pick and roll. Last season with Creighton, he was 96th percentile in the nation as a ball handler in pick and roll. Over almost 1.3 points per possession. Limited frequency, like it was somewhere around 10, 12% of his possessions, I believe. So didn't do it a ton, but that underscores the feel that he has and also the touch he's got offensively. He legitimately can score at all three levels. I think he'll probably develop something more of a 10, 12-foot float game like Kyle Anderson has. But right now, if he gets into the paint, he's got good touch there. He's good at finding open players, cutters off the dribble. Like if he's operating in pick and roll and he sees somebody open in the corner, somebody cutting baseline, pocket passes to guys rolling, like those are, he can do that too. Really all of the above. The only true weaknesses he has are as an individual defender, he's going to be a little below par as a rookie, and you're going to have to find what the right matchup is for him. He's going to be, I don't want to say you have to hide him because I think he can be adequate and I think he'll be a good team defender and he's a good rebounder, but you're not going to stick him on, a primary, secondary scorer for the other team on the perimeter. He's not going to be guarding at the point of attack. And then also the athleticism is limited and the age is up there too. But I've just described a lot of Kyle Anderson. Now, Kyle Anderson's better because he's got the knowledge and the experience, and he's a better offensive initiator for those reasons, and he's a better individual defender. He's got a little bit better size and probably a little bit more athleticism overall, even if he plays at a slower pace. There's actually the way that Baylor Scheierman plays, it's almost like this is like the weirdest combo ever to say, and I don't mean this in terms of like, well, I don't know. I'm just going to say it's a little bit like Kyle Anderson meets Luka Doncic. Like, I feel like the offensive craftiness is at least fluid to the level. It's not obviously to the level of Luka. Not at all saying he's Luka or he'll ever be anything anywhere near Luka because he won't. But the fluidity with which he plays is like Luka. The pace is somewhere in the Luka to Kyle Anderson. I don't think is as slow as slow-mo, but it's maybe not quite as fast, which is the wrong word, but as quick as Luka Doncic, but the craftiness is there. So I do think the offensive field will play in the NBA. I think he's a 3 or a 4, similar to Kyle Anderson in that regard. Again, a little bit smaller, but I think he'll rebound the ball just as good, if not better, at the pro level. So Baylor Scheierman sitting here right now is maybe one of my favorite picks at 27 for Minnesota. And he's mocked anywhere from, like, I've seen people talking about him like very late lottery, around 20, all the way to like the Ringer had him at like 33 on their mock draft. He was 28 on the CBS mock draft. He was 33 also on the Yahoo mock draft. So all over the map. SB Nation, I don't think had him in the first round. They only did the first round and didn't go into the second. So like I haven't seen him higher than 27 other than, a couple kind of fringe mock drafts, and a lot of podcasters seem to really like him. Like I think there's a legit shot he's a quick riser, but he also may be there at 27. And if he's there, I don't think he's there at 33. I think or at 37, excuse me. I think he certainly is off the board somewhere between 27 and 37 if the Wolves don't take him. So I like him at 27. I think Baylor Scheierman would be a fine selection for Minnesota. All right, let's transition into talking about Kyshawn George out of the University of Miami. Kyshawn George, by the way, it's spelled, it looks like Kyshawn. I did research on this to confirm it is Kyshawn. So promise I'm not saying it wrong, at least according to the University of Miami athletic department profile page for him. It's Kyshawn George. He is Swiss, went to high school in France, and then came over to play at the University of Miami last year. He's another kind of oversized guard. 6'7" with a 6'10" wingspan. He is a good shooter and a very good ball handler for his size. He's really more of a two guard with, not quite the athleticism that you'd love to have in a 2 or a 3, but the feel and court vision and passing ability and ball handling ability of a 1. Like truly, he handles the ball like a point guard, but he's 6'7" with a 6'10" wingspan. And that's probably his best trait is his ball handling ability. And in watching his game, I was really, really impressed with his court vision and how confident and consistent he was with his passing. And it wasn't like, Ricky Rubio or LaMelo Ball. Like you weren't looking at this saying, oh, he's a generational passer, just really solid. The hit ahead passes in transition, always seemed to be making the right pass, swinging the ball in the half court. He had a few next level passes where he'd put the ball on the floor and then find an open man. Those are mixed in there. It's not consistent, but he can do it. And I would probably describe his passing ability as not spectacular, but certainly impressive. And what are the Wolves looking for? They're not looking for somebody to come in and be spectacular as a passer. They're looking for somebody to be consistent, make the right play, and provide some size. And, well, not that they didn't already have size, but, I mean, if you're looking to fill a Kyle Anderson role, a Monte Morris role, Jordan McLaughlin role, what was a Shake Milton role last year, to play alongside Nickeil Alexander-Walker, obviously size is important. And Tim Conley and Chris Finch want big guards. Kyshawn George fits that mold. He's not ultra athletic. I think he's got enough athleticism to stick, certainly as a rotation guy in the NBA. I should actually, real quick, I forgot I was going to do a ceiling for each of these guys. So I'm going to move backwards on Baylor Scheierman. I think Scheierman's got starter upside. I think he's probably like a 6-man, almost like Kyle Anderson, where some year he may end up as a starter. He may be more of a 6-man type. Kyshawn George, I think, is probably the same, although I think he's probably best cast in like a 7th-man type role. Now, he's got the upside to be better. He absolutely has the upside to be a starter in this league. Kyshawn George does. I think the floor is lower. The ceiling is higher than it would be for, say, Baylor Scheierman. I also think getting to Kyshawn George's ceiling is going to be really difficult because he has modest athleticism and he's coming out after only 1 year at Miami. He only averaged like 7 or 8 points a game, I think. 7.6 points per game last year at Miami. He shot it well, 47% from 2, 41% from 3. And didn't get to the line a ton at all because he didn't have, we'll talk more about this, but there isn't much in terms of an off the dribble or in the paint game for Kyshawn George. But the touch and the feel offensively, and again, I go back to the ball handling, the understanding of timing and spacing and floor balance and some of that stuff, really good in transition. If he had a little more athleticism, we'd be talking about him as a surefire lottery pick, and he may still be a lottery pick. He's being mocked from mid-lottery all the way to like mid-late 20s. This is what this year's draft is. And while Scheierman has a higher floor and he's going to be a plug-and-play guy in some capacity as a rotation player in the NBA, Kyshawn George may require a little bit more seasoning. And in general, I'm shying away from the Wolves taking an upside swing at 27 because they already have a top 7 and they already have some superstars and they already are a conference finals team that won 56 games last year. They've got a bunch of young guys on the bench that are raw. But I'm okay with Kyshawn George. And maybe not at 27. Maybe I like him more at 37 if he somehow slides there. But I'll explain what I think his fit with Minnesota could be and kind of put a bow on a comp for him and where I think he'll end up. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action when you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week. From lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to increase your chances of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Plus, in June, which is a good time of year with a little bit less sports going on, basketball's over, hockey is about to be over, baseball's midseason, football hasn't started yet. It's the perfect time to try something new. Try out esports this month. For every Wednesday and Saturday in June, if your lineup doesn't win, you'll get your entry fee back. Choose from Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, League of Legends, and more. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right. Kyshawn George out of Miami. I think he's got a lot of similarities to Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And coming out of Virginia Tech, was maybe a little more polished than Kyshawn George. I think there was at least the thought that he had more offensive game initially. I actually think George is a better ball handler and certainly a more consistent shooter than Na was coming out. I just think there was the idea that Na could do more off the dribble and be a legit top scoring option. There's a reason he was talked about as a lottery pick that year. Kyshawn George in a weak draft is not, I don't think, going to be a lottery pick because there's some question about, and there's also limited athleticism. He's not quite the athlete that Nickeil Alexander-Walker is. I see him right now as probably already a better passing version of Nickeil. He's going to be not as good defensively. He's certainly more raw defensively, and he doesn't have anything else to his offense. Now, Alexander-Walker, where he found his niche in the NBA over the last, call it 18 months, mostly with Minnesota, he figured out how to be a role player and when to have those big moments where he could step up and be a little bit more aggressive offensively. You saw him score in the paint, it seemed like one reverse layup a game in the playoffs. Like he can do that stuff, but he doesn't need to anymore. And that's, I think, where Kyshawn George will end up. Kyshawn George doesn't put the ball on the floor and score right now. It's pretty much 3-pointer, score in transition or bust. He only got to the line. He shot 27 total free throws this season in 31 games. He averaged less than a free throw attempt per game. Now, he was good when he got there, 78%. He was 41% on threes, 40.8%. And he was good in transition. So the touch is there and the feel is there. We talked about his shooting, his ball handling. He's not strong. He needs to build out his frame more. He needs to become stronger to be an impactful NBA player. So, and I also think the modest athleticism limits his upside a little, but there is upside there. And the reason why I'm okay with the Wolves taking a mini swing on a guy like this, I don't know that it's a swing when you're picking at 27, but because I think he could actually be plug and play as a defender and as a ball handler almost immediately. Well, like when the Wolves drafted Wendell Moore a couple of years ago, I talked about him as a what did I call him? Not a superstar role player. What's the term I use? Let me see if I have it nearby in my notes. What I called I called him a two-way role player because Wendell Moore, he should have been a 3-and-D guy. He was 41% on threes at Duke. He was over 50% catch and shoot, a good defender. But he was kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. But I think we were a little more confident in his shooting ability than what he ended up being able to do, at least at the G League / NBA level so far. Kyshawn George, I have a little bit more confidence in his offensive ability than Wendell Moore Jr., and there's certainly more upside there offensively. Defensively, he's got better size than Wendell Moore, and he's actually a little bigger than Na. He's actually an inch taller and has an inch longer wingspan than Nickeil Alexander-Walker does. So I see him as a bigger upside version of Alexander-Walker, certainly more of an upside play than a Wendell Moore Jr., but I think he's plug and play now because I think he'll hold his own defensively. I think he could initiate some offense. He's not going to be a star right away. And so if you want him to be a star, maybe a team like Washington, who's picking I want to say right before Minnesota, maybe he's a fit there. Yeah, they're actually one pick in front of Minnesota. He's going to get the opportunity to play there, and maybe he becomes a volume scorer. But if he's with a team like Minnesota and can learn to play a role, I think he's got an Alexander Walker-like role with Minnesota. I'm not doing this in order of like my favorite to least favorite picks for Minnesota at 27. So this isn't like I'm not doing this in any particular order, talking about Scheierman first and then Kyshawn George. When it's all said and done, next Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm going to give like my big board for the Wolves, my Wolves big board, realistically at 27 and at 37. These guys will both be on it. They won't be 1 and 2 necessarily, but there's things that I like about Kyshawn George. Now, the reason to not draft him is that he is really raw and there isn't anything else offensively. And he's going to be a catch and shoot guy. And I already said, you don't necessarily want to give your backup point guard job to a rookie when you're a 56-win team. I'm not saying he would purely be a backup point guard. I see him again in an Alexander Walker type role where he's off ball, but he can initiate some offense, be a good passer, be a good ball handler, hopefully make good decisions and be athletic enough and big enough defensively. So I like Kyshawn George. I wouldn't be too upset. If he's there at 27, it would be a mild surprise. He's mocked at 26 on the Ringer. He's mocked at 25 on CBS. He's mocked at 23 on SB Nation. And where is he on Yahoo? He is mocked at 14 to Portland on Yahoo. So all over the map from 14 to 26, but always before Minnesota on all these mocks. So it'd be a mild surprise if he's there at 27. I actually think he's the type of player the Wolves would like because I think the three-point shooting and the size is projectable. And even with modest athleticism, I think he could be an impactful NBA player, at least a rotation NBA player. Between the two, Baylor Scheierman to me is the better pick at 27, and he's also more likely to be available. I just think he's a better fit for an established Wolves team to kind of plug and play as an 8th or 9th guy in the rotation. All right, 2 more players. We'll do 2 more players on Friday. Stay tuned to see who those are. We'll do at least 2 more on Monday and Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, I'll probably do a big board where I'll kind of rank the 8 guys that I'll talk about more extensively. And then I'll add a couple more guys to the list, players that I would look at if I were the Wolves at both 27 and 37. So that's what we'll do here over the next several days. Stay tuned to that. We're also going to be doing a mock draft over at or with the other Locked On hosts. So I'll give some results of that here on the show as we kind of go through that. And then next week, the night of the draft, the first round, next Wednesday night, we'll be doing live clips, live interviews following the Wolves, following each pick. So I'll do a live interview after the Wolves pick as well. So more info as we get closer. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch, of course, on YouTube, and you can watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's also available now on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.